So, everyone, I want to say at the very start and be transparent about this. I watched this yesterday, and I was furious. I oftentimes, when there is a pathway before me between anger and sadness, I'll go to extreme sadness, but this time I went to extreme anger, and I was almost screaming at my computer. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I consider Ben Burgis to be a friend. I've definitely lost contact and touch with him a lot over the past couple years, especially seeing this really fucking horrifying arc. It's been ever since. I mean, people have been saying for a long time that the writing's been on the wall. Like, why did he write an entire book about canceling comedians? And I even debated him on that topic because I'd watched a whole bunch of his conversations with Jacobin and these other, people and interviews and stuff like that. And he was consistently taking this take where it's just like, why is this what the left is concentrating on? It's kind of this whole like, purity scolding, woke scoldery of the SJW left who think that like identity politics are real causes. And it's like, no, the snowflakes are the opposite direction. All of these fucking comedians who are supposed to be these fucking, like, they're the ones like, oh, no one can handle the truth. You're not ready for the truth zone. You don't know all the truth bombs I'm about to fucking drop on you. This is the fucking fat boy and little boy of truth bombs. This is basically Hiroshima. Here we go. Truth bombs exploding. All this kind of stuff. Like, you're all snowflakes. Like the Joe Rogans of the world, all of them, they all just fucking crumble into little baby testicles, and they're just basically, please don't make fun of us, don't criticize our take. Like, people have a right to criticize shit takes. People have a right, like, Dave Chappelle's one of my biggest inspirations. Dave Chappelle's stand-up specials were my Bibles. When his show, and like both Half Baked and when his show came out, I was just rewatching his episodes nonstop to the point that it would annoy people who were my friends and partners because I was so fucking like, Dave Chappelle was one of the funniest human beings. He could make me laugh just by the sound of his laugh alone, and I was like, this guy is what I would consider to be a complete genius. So yeah, I've earned the right to criticize Dave Chappelle's turfy ass transphobic fucking horror show that he's turned into. Absolutely, I have. All right, I agree with his takes and his fucking his analysis about the intersection between LGBTQ plus people, especially white LGBTQ plus people, and how there is a massive problem with racism, yes, within queer communities, and racism especially amongst queer white folk who will not stop doing this thing where just because they're oppressed, they feel that they're suddenly above even analyzing their own forms of racism and bigotry. Because yes, there's going to be a lot of people of color who gravitate towards queer communities because there's a lot of transphobia and homophobia within their own communities. So if it's one of those things where I found a new home amongst all of these queer people who love me for being queer, and that's such a beautiful thing, and I'm so happy we can all share in each other's love and stuff like that, you're still fucking being racist. I can't escape the racism though. Doesn't matter, right? And that's an aspect that's 100% true, but oh man, does that whole Chappelle thing fall apart once you start acknowledging, but there's also black trans people. There's also black lesbians. There's also black gay people, black gay men that, yes, have to deal with the racism that's present within the white gay community as well. These things can be discussed while at the same time not throwing trans people under the bus to make those points. You don't get to throw one marginalized group fucking to the right wing and to the fucking fascists in service of pointing out a very important truth. A very important truth. And the reason I'm going on a bit of a rant here is that this is crucial to because when I watched this, I did not cancel Anna Kasparian in the way that is being fabricated by Jink and Anna and all these other people. That is false. This idea that it's like, well, these people are demanding extremist dogma. We've all been pointing out incredibly specific takes that she has made that are wrong, that promote and do fear-mongering for the far right, that can be utilized by and are being utilized because, look, it's happened. Fox News headline, blah, blah, blah. Prominent leftist says that puberty blockers can cause irreparable damage to children. It's like, oh my God, the endocrine society knows way more about this than you. They do. Way more than you. And they've said that it's safe and reversible. Why are you not listening to them? They're the scientists. They're the very ones who you should be like, oh, so have you done any science on this? We have. Yes. Turns out these products for decades have been available to cis children, and they've been FDA approved for the use in cis children. for people who have precocious puberty, who experience puberty too early, or a variety of other reasons. They have been used on cis kids, and they, yes, when their use is stopped, can be reversed. Are they without side effects? No. No one has said that. No one will say that. This is again the gender critical strategies they've been employing in the UK. They're trying to import in a lot of ways over here because they've been shown to be very effective in the UK. It gives people a liberal position to stand upon and try to act like you're not a bigot, a TERF, or a transphobe. You get to suddenly be like, no, I am for trans rights for adults. Okay, I believe adults who are trans should be able to exist. I have trans friends. We need to stop mutilating kids. That's why I'm here. We need to stop the mutilation of children and prevent them from being chemically castrated. That's why I'm here. And you're like, fuck. So I watched this and I was obviously furious. Why I then decided to show this to all of you was because of what happens with J. Andrew World. And it's a really touching moment. It's honestly, to see how passionate he is about this topic and push back immediately against a lot of the fucked up shit that Ben says here, is a really wondrous thing to see. But I'm also going to be doing something different. The reason I wanted to watch this the next day was because I knew that I was going to be way less angry, which I am. I'm actually way less angry. I've been streaming for a while. I got the stuff out of my system. We made fun of a lot of ghouls because, again, I am friends with Ben. Full disclosure, I used to have a show called Ask a Socialist with Ben Burgis. This is Baby Lance of 4 years ago, and this is our show where we would basically, it was supposed to be like a Sunday morning cartoon where we talk to Ben Burgis and we get him to roast like Jordan Peterson or Dave Rubin or Ben Shapiro and be like, hey professor, hey, can we learn a whole bunch of new stuff? Can you go after this bad guy named like Ben Shapiro? And then he'd be like, yes, off I go. And then he would, like, you know, give them an argument. It just took a really long time to edit, unfortunately, because I would have to basically, like, you know, Ben would just basically record for a long time and I'd have to find the parts that lined up the best with the parts of the Jordan Peter. I'll show you the intro just to give you an idea of the flavor.
Have you noticed a disturbing new trend occurring all over university campuses these days?
Candace Owens, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro,
Charlie Kirk,
all destroying liberals with truth bombs.
It's like liberals are just getting owned everywhere.
I genuinely feel that those people go onto campuses and look for the lowest common denominator, or basically grab anyone they can and then just supercut the whole thing together.
It was a little heavier back then.
To make it look like they're just dropping logic like Hiroshima.
Yeah, you're just picking fights with anybody and, you know, Project Veritas.
Yes, exactly,
right?
yeah. We should do that. We should go to a campus one day and have a giant sign like "Socialism is onion." It's like "cuck my mind" or something.
And then just super cut it.
Yeah, super cut all the answers just to see what we get. I just wish there was someone on the other side, someone with dignity, grace, and aplomb, and intelligence who could attack these radicals.
Yeah, isn't there somebody out there who could save us?
You get it. This was, I mean, early days, obviously, but the fun is there-ish.
Lance and Dave.
Wow, Professor of Philosophy, Ben Burgis!
Like, you know, we were all having a great time, and we ripped into the goals, and that was all good. And then, anyways, fast forward till now. The reason I thought I would be in a good place to talk about this and cover this is because I am going to be coming at this from a position of good faith, as I did with Anna Kasparian initially, even though I was literally screaming yesterday. Screaming. I was screaming at the computer at parts of this because it's so frustratingly bad. But if, and I am going to do a huge if because I hope Ben watches this, and I'll even send him a link via DM. I hope Ben watches this for the simple reason that I am going to come at the worries and struggles that he has towards the trans community in this video, in good faith, as requested, with links and sources to back up my claims so we can talk about this from a position of science for the benefit of our messaging, because our messaging is, yes, oh so crucial right now. You can see immediately what happens as soon as the right gets voices on the left or even the center to suddenly say things out loud like puberty blockers can cause irreparable damage to children.
You know, I have been really frustrated actually by some of the stuff on the first level. So, so I saw, for example, there was, so there have been, issues about, use of certain kinds of inclusive terminology that might be sort of unfamiliar or off-putting to a lot of people, but do include more people than more familiar terminology. Birthing persons, that was that whole controversy a little while back. There's been some stuff about some of the sort of gray areas and edge cases, with regard to trans athletes, and debates about puberty blockers and stuff like that. None of this, Anna hasn't expressed any opinion about any of this stuff that surprised me. For one thing, I've been talking to her about, like all of these issues and many more for years, right? I mean, like I have a pretty good idea. These are all sort of very, these are all the kinds of, look, they're wildly controversial issues. I don't have the slightest problem with anybody saying that she got any of them wrong. I'm not totally sure what I think about some of these issues, right? And I want to get into why not a little bit more in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about some of what's frustrated me about the way the discussion has played out. So I have there's this 9-second clip that I saw was going around on Twitter, that there was a high-profile account tweeted this out. It got 15,000 likes. It's this clip of Anna talking about this TYT employee Benny, who was quit, partially because of her disagreement with Anna about some of these issues, and this was tweeted out as
Benny's going to be on the show in about an hour. By the way,
it's like, oh my God, you're already being criticized for transphobia, and look, you're misgendering this person. So I just want to start with that clip, the 9-second one.
So unfortunately, Benny has decided to leave TYT. I am definitely heartbroken over her decision to do that.
So the way that this was treated, when it was tweeted out, is, oh, look at this, right? This is, that she's sort of doing this obnoxious dig, that's how it's being misinterpreted, that this is intentional. But I think if you watch literally anything beyond those 9 seconds of literally a second of stumbling, and then Anna doing exactly what people are always told to do if you accidentally misgender somebody, which is quickly correct yourself and move on without making a big issue of it. Well, let's watch the longer version of the clip.
So unfortunately, Benny has decided to leave TYT. I am definitely heartbroken over her decision to do that. I wish that Benny decided to stay here despite our, in my opinion, incredibly minor differences of opinion that have been blown out of proportion on Twitter with people encouraging Benny to leave.
That's deeply unfair to say to someone who is in a marginalized community, especially who's like speaking up directly and identifying very, very specific things. It is gaslighting of the highest degree to continuously say, oh, we only really disagree on 2%. We don't really have a disagreement. You agree with me almost. That is like such a devious tactic when someone is like, I have specific problems with your takes. Here is my specific issues with the specific things that you said. Stop saying that I agree with everything you say. Stop saying that we only have a 2% disagreement. And these specifics, by the way, are very serious issues. One of which, if you are actually going to put this out there, it may get picked up by the right to far right media and then all of a sudden utilized as a way of preventing children from having health care. If they start to get wind of this, that you think that puberty blockers, because you haven't done the research, if you think puberty blockers cause irreparable damage to children and you want to wade into this culture war issue, which again is not something you would ever do for other forms of healthcare to kids. You wouldn't talk about chemotherapy this way, even though that causes very potential irreparable harm to children. Children who have leukemia, who are given chemotherapy, that can cause irreparable damage to children. It makes their hair fall out. It makes them sick. It can cause them to become weak and malnourished. They stop eating. This shit looks horrifying. Are you going to stand in front of a room and a doctor and be like, I don't think they should have access to any of that? You shouldn't be able to make that decision because of the irreparable harm that could happen to the children. You'd be like, get the fuck out of the room, weirdo. Why are you here?
TYT. Benny is now doing her own thing, has her own YouTube channel, had already had her own Twitch channel and all of that. I really, really encourage you guys to go out there and support Benny and the work that she's doing. I think the perspectives that she is sharing with you all is an important perspective. I think that perspective was also incredibly important to have here at TYT. And I'm very sad that she's no longer sharing that perspective here with us. But I have no ill will, no hate, no bad feelings toward Benny whatsoever. I know that she's upset with me. I want to be clear in saying that I've never, ever supported bans on gender affirming care. I am still very much supportive of the transgender community. My opinions mostly center on tactics in order to garner.
You can't promote Jesse Singal, a noted transphobe, by the way, who's already pushed misinformation, may be in a fucking world of trouble with HIPAA. We'll talk about that in a bit. As well as the fact that, like, even if he didn't directly promote conversion therapy, he wrote an article that was favorable to a conversion therapist talking about his conversion therapy. Yes, there's an entire article in GLAAD about Jesse Singal. It is well documented at this point that he clearly has an ideologically driven agenda that is, again, unscientific. It's one thing for people to be like, well, it's really frightening the fact that we can't have a conversation about this, and that every single journalist thinks it's in the best interest of trans people to make trans people's lives as dangerous as possible. Like, all the journalists have been failing the moment. Like, there are exceptions, of course, but man, is history going to be unkind to every single journalist who's like, all right, we need to have a debate. Can we please both sides this issue? On the one end, we have, again, detransitioners, of which they encompass, I'm thinking, less than 4% of all people who transition. Let's interview 3 or 4 detransitioners, and then talk to maybe like one activist. And then we'll put the activist part near the end. And then, but basically, we'll talk about the horrors of detransition and how much it ruins lives. We need to have this debate. Why won't anyone have the debate? I don't get it. I don't get it. Why am I being silenced? This is anti-free speech, you know?
Or more support for the trans community.
And I guess
on one side we have Ollie
watch the
London.
minute and 20-second version and think the 9-second version was honest. The one that got 15,000 likes. That doing the momentary stumble. Somebody who, by the way, I believe did use male pronouns when Anna first knew her, and now uses female ones. And
so that's absolutely 100% not an excuse for someone misgendering someone else. But yes, you're completely correct that if someone misgenders someone else and then corrects themselves and apologizes, that is all there is to it. People, I think, were hypercritical of this because it came at a time when this is a very highly charged issue that Anna is directly catching criticism from trans people for, and then in her discussing this, it's like, of all times, you probably should have done a little bit more practice when you were preparing your statement or comments to reaffirm that you understood what someone's gender was. That's probably a little bit more where the anger came from.
I think the idea of a half-second slip is revealing the sort of evil in your soul rather than being a mistake. I think is really deeply implausible and kind of disturbing. I think.
And this also, by the way, this was like such a small part of it all, right? Like, if you want me to grant you that, yes, this is not the totality of what Anna's message was in that one little 9-second clip. Of course not, but that's what clipping and shipping is. It happens to all of us. That's what I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm also saying that this is not what people take problem with Anna over.
That everybody will sometimes, even when it's not that, even when you're talking about cis people, I think it's not that uncommon to sometimes make a momentary mistake like that. So that's like, I think, pretty representative of a lot of what bothered me. And the stuff in that interview with Adam and Sitch, I would say people taking this sort of these little clips of something that sounds bad and sort of running with it and making this huge deal about it in ways they're sort of based on almost farcically uncharitable interpretations of it, right? So there's a part of
to be completely fair, I watched it. I watched it and criticized bit by bit individually. I wasn't watching clips. I just watched the original source.
We're just basically saying, well, one problem with identity politics and language policing and all this stuff is that people end up, being awkward about it, interacting outside of their demographic group because they don't want to say the wrong thing, which is actually the opposite of what we should want. And that's interpreted as, Anna is saying Black people are too sensitive or something like that. I think that's really not at all, what's being said there. And I also think, some of the context a lot of people are missing is that, part of what she's expressed on this show in the recent past, on our show, is that something that she's been bothered more about lately, since it's not like give them an argument where you just get on and make arguments and make fun of conservatives and whatever. I mean, TYT, there's an actual journalism component, and I think that she's been increasingly bothered by sort of realizing how much people sort of filter the media that they consume, and how much.
I'm not opposed to that in theory. I'm just curious, that's not a thing that TYT like states as their purpose, right? Are they actually, is there like a news team element to TYT that actually gets the stories? Because I thought they did the same thing that like Majority Report or the other people do, where they take legacy media news and then they report upon the reporting from a specific either like centrist or center left or progressive like angle on any given story, right? That's kind of it. There used to be. Oh, okay.
If you're sort of in one or the other of these competing media bubbles, oftentimes the information you get about different stories is importantly flawed or inaccurate. And I know she's felt really bad about it.
I just want to thank you for showing her on this topic, because I agree with her more and more every single time you show it. Oh, you agree with Anna more and more. It's reaffirming your position. Well, honestly, that's amazing for you to watch hours and hours of my content just so you can learn nothing. That just sounds like a big waste of time. I would assume you have better things to do. I would hope anyway.
Times when she's sort of repeated narratives about
I've
the
learned
different news
nothing.
stories that she's
You
sort of
can
decided
teach
were
me
entirely
no
accurate,
thing.
because that's what everybody in sort of her bubble was saying. And I think some of the stuff about puberty blockers fits into that. And I think there's also a lot of people with a lot of agendas of their own from various directions, who sort of wanted to run with that and present it as if Anna was saying, oh, we should have like DeSantis-style laws banning puberty blockers. When not only did she not say that, she actually says the opposite of that in the interview. She says, look, I'm not saying that, that even once you're sort of more fully aware of the medical debate about risks and benefits of this, which there actually is one. I'm sorry, there is. There's, if you look at.
So here's where I want to start doing the good faith interjections, because here's where things really derail, and they derail very rapidly. So yeah, I'm going to just quickly state that any debate that should be taking place in regards to this should be between patients, doctors, the children, the parents, those who are the people who should be involved. And then in terms of the understanding of the medicine, the science, all that kind of stuff, leave that to researchers, leave that to the larger scientific community, who can then collectively pool information together to be able to make what is the best potential recommendation to patients. This is the same thing that we would not have a debate about if it was related to non-trans issues, right? No one is sitting in a circle, especially there's no group of cis men who are sitting around being like, should we or should we not allow people to get their appendixes taken out if they have appendicitis? Should we or should we not allow people to have knee surgery? It turns out that approximately 20% of people who have knee surgery regret it. 20%. That's really high. That's way higher than fucking gender affirming care. Way, way higher. I don't know. Should we deny people knee surgery? Just because like that is mutilation, right? They're changing the actual, like they're opening their bodies up to mutilate them. Is there any discussion about gender affirming care when it comes to cis people? At all, by the way. And if you're like, well, cis adults, I'm for trans adults as well. Okay, fine. But cis teenagers, because there's tens of thousands, something like 67,000 surgeries in America on teenagers in the form of gender affirming care, and that ranges from people getting nose jobs to getting cheek implants to getting skin grafts to getting all kinds of things, and yes, even thousands of breast implants. All of that is happening, but there's no debate there either. No, well, is this mutilation? Are we permanently altering these children's bodies? In fact, that's been happening for a much larger time on a much larger scale. Why does that never get brought up? Why is there no debate there? Does it start to seem weird, by the way, if you are wanting to debate strangers, teenagers' ability to get breast implants? Does that start to get weird? If all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I want to actually have a conversation and a debate about whether or not a 16-year-old girl who I have no direct attachment with, I'm not a family member at all, should be allowed to get breast implants. I want to have that discussion and debate. Like when it's worded that way, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, that's really, really, really weird. That's strange. And this one is in the form of gender affirming care, which means it can alleviate symptoms of gender dysphoria, which means it can have actually life-saving benefits. This is not simply done for someone as a cosmetic upgrade or whatever you want to call it. This is something that can directly impact and change someone's life. That's probably got to be even more important, I would assume,
At the way this is played out in a lot of European countries, etc. There is debate about this stuff, right? So like the extent to which puberty blockers are reversible. There's clearly a sense in which they are reversible, which is you can stop taking them and still go through puberty, right? That's, that's true. Whether all of the effects of them or all the side effects are entirely reversible, that's much more controversial. There are concerns about infertility, et cetera. None of that means that if, family doctors, gender clinicians who know vastly more about this than any of us do, et cetera, might not decide in some cases that it's well worth the risk, that it's that all medicine comes with risks, right? You're always doing it.
Correct, which is why right now this is again the center of a culture war where this conversation should be left between patients, doctors. That's it. Parents. Those are the three people who should be discussed on this. This is something that no one does lightly. Everyone is told about the risks. Everyone is told, hey, by the way, if this is something that you want to consider, please be aware of the following potential risks: bone density, yes, the potential for difficulties in achieving sexual pleasure, but that is not the broad majority of patients who undergo this, and there's actually very, very positive and good outcomes for people who do, including in still enjoying sexual pleasure later in life, even though I know the right-wingers are obsessed with that for some reason. But either way, I'm not a scientist. I am not, neither are a lot of the people talking about this issue. I'm not trans as well. Like, I am opposed to the idea of ever debating a trans person on their actual ability to have, like, you're never going to see me debate cis versus trans on, like, whether or not trans people should have rights or trans issues. I'm not. I am going to try and convince other cis people, though, because cis people are the ones who need convincing in this arena, right? When we're talking about things like puberty blockers, please, let's start using things like children's hospitals, databases, St. Louis, to give us a little quick rundown. Puberty blockers. Puberty can be confusing or difficult for a child who is trans, genderqueer, non-binary, or questioning their gender. Puberty blockers, also called hormone blockers, help delay unwanted physical changes that don't match someone's gender identity. Delaying these changes can be an important step in a young person's transition. It can also give your child more time to explore their options before deciding whether or not or how to transition. How do they work? Using puberty blockers is like hitting a pause button. By blocking the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, puberty blockers delay changes that can affect gender expression, including breast growth, facial hair growth, periods, voice deepening, widening hips. Puberty blockers don't stop acne, body odor, or underarm or pubic hair development because these changes are not controlled only by estrogen or by testosterone. Are puberty blockers safe? More experts, including our team, believe that puberty blockers are safe. The Endocrine Society and the World Professional Association for Transgender Health support the use of puberty blockers for kids who want to delay and prevent unwanted physical changes. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved puberty blockers for children who start puberty at a young age for decades, by the way. What are the potential side effects? Of course there are potential side effects. While puberty blockers are generally considered safe, they still can have side effects. Not everyone experiences the following, but some people do. Lower bone density, delayed growth plate closure, leading to slightly taller adult height, less development of genital tissue, which may limit options for gender-affirming surgery later in life. Other possible long-term side effects are not yet known, and short-term headache, fatigue, insomnia, changes in weight, spotting, or irregular periods. And by the way, puberty blockers are something that if you are undergoing gender-affirming care is something that people want to not have you on. Doctors, people who are recommending this form of gender-affirming care want to use it solely as a way of buying you some time to make a very serious decision. If you decide that you want to transition, they take you off puberty blockers and they put you onto hormone replacement therapy. Here's the wild thing that we've discovered about ourselves. Within our own coding, we have the ability, we have DNA, we have cells that can go and be activated either by one hormone or another to move towards what we typically consider to be more masculine or feminine. We can actually hack our own bodies by providing more of one of these hormones, which suddenly will allow us to look and we begin to change and have qualities and features that we typically associate with either masculine or feminine in either direction. It is an absolute modern miracle that we have these abilities. I think it is incredibly cool that we have science that has come so far that it can do things that, yes, can help a very marginalized community achieve what seems to be, based on the data, the science, the results, all of it, life-saving medication and procedures. Life-saving. The Endocrine Society would be my go-to if you want to go read up more about on the safety of puberty blockers. Puberty blockers are temporary. There's injectable blockers such as Lupron that can be 1, 3, or 6 months. Patients can continue getting injections until they decide what to do next. There's also implants, which are placed just under the skin of the arm. They can last 12 to 24 months before they need to be replaced. If your child decides to continue transitioning, they will likely want to consider hormone therapy and then gender-affirming surgery down the road. And again, that's if they want that. If your child decides they want to develop characteristics of the sex they were assigned at birth, birth, they can simply stop taking puberty blockers. Again, this is stuff that should be decided amongst doctors, patients, and the kids. Not the rest of us. And you would not apply this stringent kind of like, why can't we have a debate about this for any other form of healthcare for children that you're not directly involved of? At least I don't see that. If there is a battle going on for people who want to fight against the right to take out appendixes because it's a mutilation of a person's body and they lose their appendix, well then, I mean, show it to me.
Balancing act. But, you know, there is a sort of simplistic flattening of the factual premise here that often takes place. And there's this interpretation of that, of sort of saying some of these things as being transphobic, that in some cases you have right-wingers who are like, look, big progressive says this thing that we like, and they're just emphasizing the part that they like and ignoring all the stuff that she says that they don't like.
Well, yeah, of course they're going to do that. They're not honest actors. You know that because obviously you've seen how fucking terrible Project Veritas was to you, and that was like, obviously he's an asshole. James O'Keefe is a liar, a con man, and he's going to do things like that where he tries to basically just get gotchas and all this kind of stuff. But why give it to them at all? Would be my point. Why at all? If it's like, yeah, they're going to hyper focus, like, so Anna Kasparian, she has a lifetime of advocacy for civil rights in a lot of cases, except when it happens to be the prison industrial complex, but a lifetime of advocacy in a lot of different categories for a lot of different things. And in this case, she's advocated before for trans rights, which is true. No one is taking that away from her. No one is calling her an out and fucking deplorable, irreversibly evil, fascist Nazi now. No one is doing that. These are extremes that the other side is labeling her as. People have very specific criticisms of very specific takes for specific reasons. Like you were mentioning right now, that Fox News headline, what does it say? Fox News, Anna Kasparian, puberty. That should be enough, right? Yeah. Fucking giant headline. Progressive journalist breaks with left, warns puberty blockers can cause irreparable harm to children. The young host, Anna Kasparian, warned journalists risk cancellation for reporting on trans issues. This has real world dangerous consequences. This is exactly why everyone has said and is being so vocal about this and also being so nice along the way. That's why so many people, myself included, were criticized for how there is a difference, and a fair call out, by the way, by Olayemi. There is a difference in the way that people have been treating, say, Anna Kasparian, and how they've treated other figures in the past. Absolutely, there has been. And it's not just because of the work that she's done. A lot of people happen to have working relationships with her, friendships with her. They have, yes, seen the good things that she has done, and they're coming at a place of, hey, by the way, this is going to benefit and serve the far right. They're going to weaponize this. Why are you doing this? Please stop. Jesse Singal is a transphobe. Absolutely a transphobe.
And I understand that. But there's also, I think a lot of times the right is just much more strategic about this stuff than we are. They'll sort of, if somebody says 20 things and 19 of them disagree with them and one of them agrees with them, they'll play up the one. And oftentimes for us, instead of playing up the 19, we're like, well, what the fuck? What happened with that one?
Because this is a battle for civil rights. I'm not trying to be in any way condescending in regards to treating anyone in any way as if you didn't realize that. But this is a battle for civil rights. People's civil rights, in this specific case, trans people's civil rights, are being taken away from them before their very eyes. Hundreds of bills being passed by right-wing fucking Christian nationalists, Christian fascists. It's a very serious time. So snaps don't matter. Stickers don't matter. I'm totally yes, she's done great things for trans people. Good. Keep doing those great things. Here's examples of her directly benefiting the right and the right-wing culture war and directly potentially eroding the civil rights of trans people and making the lives of trans people scarier as a result of what she is doing specifically. And here it is. Here's the Fox News fucking giant banner headline that comes with this kind of stuff. So you could be great. And it's not 19 to 1, by the way, of the 20, the 20th score of the transphobe. It's not like, well, she's been good 19. Stop doing the, we agree on 2%. We disagree on 2%. On 90% of things, she's a great ally. She's a good ally. And then people are like, I'm a great ally. Just listen to me and all this kind of stuff. It's like people are taking umbrage with very specific things, and you won't address those specific things, Anna. She's not responding. Neither is Cenk when Aaron is like, hey, by the way, here's multiple medical associations, organizations, the Endocrine Society, for example, that have said the puberty blockers are safe for trans children to take. This is people with way more knowledge on the subject than you. Why are you allowing them to have this? Why are you giving the right this? This is unscientific. It's a lie.
You know, what's wrong with you? In ways that I worry about, honestly. I mean, for reasons much more than, you know, look, obviously we're talking about a friend of mine. I won't pretend not to be personally offended by a lot of what I've seen. I have been. I'm obviously wildly biased. I'm wildly offended when I say some of these things, and people will say, oh, LMFAO, bro, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to do this. Where it's like, oh, what you're essentially saying is, oh, you can just shut up when you think a friend of yours is being attacked unfairly, you know, for the purpose of not getting yelled at yourself. That's not a very nice thing to say about somebody's moral character, frankly, that you think that they would do that. But I also think
people again are calling out her takes, and she's not responding to specific call outs. And in a lot of cases, we also know that she knows that this is wrong because we have video of her calling this actual take out.
that, again, what you think about this one person is probably the least important part of this in a sort of larger objective sense, right? There's also a question about how we think about sort of building a broad coalition of everybody we can get to support us, how we sort of adjudicate disagreements that arise between people who share a lot of the same fundamental goals. And I guess the thing that I would really urge people to do with that regard is to just kind of take a beat and take a deep breath and think about principles, right? Like, in other words, why is it that we think that what we think, right? Like, just kind of move away a little bit from the yelling about whatever everybody's angry about on Twitter today, but it's like, what are the sort of fundamental underlying principles? So the thing that, you know, that I'd tweeted about this in actually before the other tweet even, but, you know, it was just sort of, you know, probably the more highbrow, well-considered tweet, you know, compared to the one that's making fun of people who are obsessing about the interview, is the Ben tweet 2 graphic that what I said about this is the egalitarian values underlying socialist politics are incompatible with social conservatism, but they don't entail taking maximalist left-coded positions on every issue or incident that people draw culture war battle lines over. You can just think stuff through as it comes up. And I guess I want to be really clear about this.
Yeah. Can we talk about the power balance here? Absolutely. I just celebrated getting 69,000. Nice. 69,000 subs on the Serf Times. Hey, if you're watching me right now and you haven't gone to youtube.com/the Serf Times and subscribed, what are you doing? Honestly, no, what are you doing? Why are you sitting there and not having subscribed to the Serf Times? It's incredible. It's the thumbnails alone. Kyle's thumbnail game is on point. Go there now, youtube.com/the Serf Times. Hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, hit thumbs up, hit all the buttons, and go hang out. It's a party over there. People are having a great time and you'll enjoy yourselves, okay? Serf Times. Anyway, 69,000. TYT has 5 million fucking million subscribers. All right. I'm very, very proud of what I've accomplished. I love this show, this community, the fact that we've grown so much, that we were hitting all these wild numbers lately. It's a beautiful thing. It swells my heart. I love being surrounded by a lot of fucking incredible people who want to, you know, fight for civil rights and justice and have fun and laugh and enjoy the many pleasures of life, you know? That's a beautiful thing, but she has way more power in terms of a media figure. For Anna Kasparian, and by the way, Olayemi, there's an example of someone who has, what, 29,000 subs, just started a YouTube channel, really has not been part of the online game, but is getting so much fucking hate. Holy shit, the hate that Olayemi is getting on a regular basis. Like, Olayemi has very, very thick skin. Like, she can handle being in the trenches with fucking assholes and then lighting them up. And then, holy fuck, to spend like 4 or 5 days straight, I've seen her replies fill up with blue check marks and fucking fascists and Nazis just nonstop being like, anti-white racist. Whoa, here's the POC racist. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Bet you want to like exterminate all the white people, like all this kind of shit. And never did she say such things. Not once. Haven't said any of those things. I never once heard her say any of that kind of stuff. For her to point out that there is a power imbalance between two individuals in terms of how they're capable of weaponizing different aspects of societal racism, systemic racism. If someone can weaponize that against another group, pointing that out is not saying that other person, you personally, all white people, hashtag not all whites, you know, or something like that. It's not this whole reverse where it's like, well, now we have to actually talk about, is it okay to be racist towards white people? I'm quite curious. It seems like some of the leftists think that's all right. Suddenly that's the new thing, you know? A whole bunch of leftists are thinking that it's okay to be racist against white people. I'll tell you why I particularly hate this for a number of reasons. Big one being that, of course, this is doing that weird reverse thing where all of a sudden you're making someone who may already have a power imbalance suddenly feel as if they're oppressed in order to make them oppress that other group. That part is certainly happening here. But a lot of the people who push that kind of shit, and whether it happens to be from any kind of, you know, white identitarian movement or, you know, far righter or alt-righter or anyone like that who's constantly speaking about what about the idea of anti-white discrimination. Well, you know what? They're doing the same thing that the MGTOW and the Red Pillars are doing to masculinity. They're doing to the idea of white racism. And I'll explain how. Because people go online, they see people who are like, hey, by the way, I think it's bad to be racist against white people. And obviously for white people, that's going to be a very easy thing to gravitate towards. So like, oh, nice, you're speaking up for people being racist towards me. This is neat. Cool, I'll hang out here. And ultimately, a lot of the messaging behind this stuff, it's not going to actually fundamentally help with the material conditions of white people who may have problems in their lives. They gravitate towards this kind of stuff and they look at it, and none of it is going to address, hey, do you come from a broken home? Hey, do you have abusive parents? Hey, under capitalism, do your parents work 2 jobs? Hey, do you have parents who are addicted to substances? Hey, do you have trouble meeting people? Hey, are you unpopular? Hey, do you have anxiety, depression? Hey, are you a man? Do you have trouble opening up, talking about emotion? Hey, are you closed off? Do you have trouble meeting women? Do you feel that somehow makes you inadequate because what you've been told is your value of a man comes from being able to be as successful as you can with women? So because you're not, and they denied you sex, you feel angry? Hey, over and over and over, this kind of stuff. People will slip down these kind of rabbit holes, and they're ultimately going to be poisonous. They're going to be venomous for people who might be looking for answers. The same thing with the red pill MGTOW. You might get into that world because you're like, oh shit, this guy, this Andrew Tate, he's appealing to my sensibilities of what a man's supposed to be. He's strong. He's a fighter. He gets all of the pussy. He's got all these cars. He's got Bugattis. Look at this guy. He's fucking crushing it. Well, I guess I've been always told I have to be like him. What else has he got to say? What has he got to say about all these big issues, you know?
Because, you know, again, I am kind of aware of the criticism of the first tweet that's like, okay, I'm kind of meta-commenting on the controversy, but I'm not really saying what I think about the underlying stuff, and I don't want to do that. I want to be as clear as possible about what I think about the underlying stuff. Which is this, that I think there are easy questions and I think there are hard questions. So the easy question, going back to the big theme of tonight, is that I think that you know, I don't understand why anybody would be a socialist in the first place if they didn't have a sort of fundamental belief in the equal rights and equal dignity of all human beings, that, you know, that anybody as a person, right, deserves respect, deserves dignity, deserves to have their, you know, material needs met, you know, deserves equality before the law, all of that stuff. So I think the easy stuff is like you should reject attempts to legally impose socially conservative values on people who you know, who might not share them. You should call people by the correct, you know, their pronouns they ask you to. You should respect the right of adults to do whatever the hell they want with their bodies, etc. Because I think all of those sort of stem in a very straightforward way from the underlying socialist values. Now, I know not everybody's going to like this, and anybody who doesn't, sorry. But, you know, I really didn't become a weirdo radical Marxist podcaster for the purposes of like not saying what I think about shit. So I will just, in a very unvarnished way, say what I think about all of it, which is to say that I don't think all questions are easy questions. Look, I was a philosophy professor before I was a podcaster. I do think there are such things as edge cases, right? Cases where different values come into conflict. It's not always totally clear what the right answer is. Given the sheer number of cases where sex or gender impact human experience, a lot of them come up around this. And none of this is a secret. This is all stuff I said on the most popular podcast in the world last year when I was asked about it. I don't usually sound off about it because I'm not an expert on any of these things. This isn't really my wheelhouse, but, you know, when I'm asked directly, I will talk about it, right? So I think that with regard to, you know, probably, you know, anybody at any age who wants to socially transition, absolutely, I think that should be supported. When it comes to medical interventions that might have long-term consequences, I think it's tough. I think that there are multiple values at stake. I don't think anybody really believes that children have total medical autonomy from the moment they can learn, you know, they learn how to talk.
No one's making that argument. No one's saying that. No one is advocating for
words. I don't think anybody really has that position on reflection. But I also think that just saying, oh, well, you just can't get any sort of gender affirming care until you're older is a bad position, because you're essentially forcing people to go through what feels like the wrong puberty, which is potentially nightmarish. So on that, what exactly is the right amount of like counseling or medical gatekeeping to do? I have no fucking idea. How would I know? That's not this is not something, not everybody has to have an opinion about everything.
I totally agree, but then why speak about it? Why talk about it? You started by saying that if I'm confronted about this, or if someone asks me, then I'll give my opinion on it. And my opinion is I just genuinely don't know. I haven't. It's not a thing I know a lot about. If it's something that it directly related to people's civil rights and directly related to people's access or ability to get healthcare, then yes, I do think we have a responsibility, if we're going to advocate for it, to do more and more research. Do we all fall short? Of course I do. Fucking hell, I've had to recorrect myself, learn more, gone back, issue fucking corrections, delete tweets, blah blah blah. Yes. I've fucked up. I'm cis. I'm gonna fuck up a little along the way, But all that being said, we still should be following the science as we would with anything else. And in this particular instance, it's one of those things where we aren't necessarily thinking that there should be a debate, quote unquote debate, between patients, doctors, and kids, and other and the relationship to healthcare outside of what the broad consensus of the scientific community is agreed upon for other things. If the broad consensus of the scientific community, because I don't know anything about removing appendixes, but if it is that if it is an inflamed appendix and at a certain point it's going to burst, the best possible procedure with very high rates of recovery and success, very, very high rates, very low rates of regret, would be to remove the appendix. That's what the broad consensus of the medical community agrees as a proper, safe procedure, right? If you take umbrage with specific elements of people's and their access to healthcare or procedures that are being done, well, then that's a completely different discussion. It's a totally different thing as towards what procedures should be gatekept. I will also please stress once again that when it happens to involve cis folk, there are much less barriers or gatekeeping that is done, if at all. It's usually money. It's like, hey, do you want gender affirming care? Do you want surgery? Do you want to be having a surgical procedure to alter the physical look of your body? Well, then how much money do you have? How much cash? Yeah, because that's basically the barrier of entry right now.
And that's one that I don't have, because I don't know. It's complicated. It's hard. I know a little bit about it. I try to educate myself about it, but I don't think I have a perfect solution to that. I'm certainly opposed to bills to outlaw it entirely. As said she was, because I think that's, I think that the vast majority of medical professionals seem to think that there is value to doing this.
And,
I think that sort of overriding that for the sake of imposing socially conservative values I don't share is not something I'm on board with. But exactly what the threshold is, I have no idea. Same for a lot of the sports stuff. There is a reason why you separate sports by sex in the first place. That's and there is an entire debate about, okay, well, if you've used hormone replacement therapy for how long, does that cancel out the advantages that you'd otherwise have from somebody who's being male at birth? If so, how much? Are there other advantages that aren't canceled out? Again, look, I don't. The risk of being even more problematic, I do not just devote a lot of my life to thinking about what counts as fairness in women's sports. That's not really at the top of my list of priorities. So I do not have well worked out positions on all this. I do know, I'll say what I said on Joe Rogan, that if I had a trans daughter and the rules were set up so that there was no way that she could participate in school sports, that would bother me. I would think that was unfair. But exactly what the cutoff should be, exactly what the hormone requirements, whatever should be, I expect and hope that there's some legitimate, there's some reasonable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, stop calling it a debate. Stop referring to it as a debate. Then, like, it's one of those things where it would be so utterly bizarre in other forms of either healthcare or advocacy for civil rights for people to continuously come at it from a perspective of, well, I don't fully understand everything about this marginalized group, but I am going to try and advocate on behalf of you. But you'll have to understand it's to the extent of which I want to and or know about it. And so until I truly know about one aspect of it, I may or may not advocate in either direction,
Compromise solution to this, I don't know what it is. So there you go. There are a couple of big hot button things I do not have a well worked out position on. I'm willing to sort of lay all my cards on the table and sort of say, here's the stuff I'm sure about. Here's the stuff I'm unsure.
So here's where, in the best of faith, and this is honestly, this becomes pretty emotional coming up. So I guess trigger warning for that. But J. Andrew World has personal, firsthand experiences with some of these topics. And if that is the position, If Ben is like, I'm laying my cards on the table, I don't really know a lot about this. Don't know a lot about gender affirming care. Don't know a lot about puberty blockers. Bits and pieces, stuff like that. Then, okay, please, for the love of God, look into this strictly from a scientific perspective. Take the culture wars out of it, because like I've been saying so many times, every major medical association in the United States agrees upon the benefits of gender affirming care. And when it comes to puberty blockers, please look no further than the Endocrine Society to be able to see whether or not there's been significant research into this topic and whether or not it is safe. And again, it is not something that has been overtly protested if it's being given to cis kids. When cis kids were getting puberty blockers, there is no, well, we gotta have a debate, because those cis kids who are getting those puberty blockers, it could cause irreparable damage. And you're like, in some fringe cases it could. It has been shown, and this is something, and the reason why they're recommending it as a potential procedure, to have better outcomes for people who are going through precocious puberty. It'll have a better potential long-term outcome for the child. So it's the risk versus reward here, and the reward seems to be greater than the risk. There are risks, of course there are. It's like any other medicine. There's risks involved when you take Advil. There's risks involved when you drink a coffee. There's risks involved when you drink a Red Bull. There's risks involved when you do a fucking pill Viagra. Did you know a side effect of Viagra is death? Yes, cardiac arrest, strokes. These are side effects of Viagra. You could take a Viagra and die, but people still take them and then they go off and fuck. Because, yeah, the risk versus reward, I have a low percentage of dying through this activity, I believe, I hope. You know, knock on wood. Oh, that was not meant to be a joke. That was terrible. Trust me, I'm more ashamed of myself than you are of me. But yeah, ultimately, it's not that huge of a thing, right?
Sure about. Does Anna Kasparian get every single aspect of all of these things right? Yeah, maybe not. I mean, these are complicated issues. And I think, again, there's all the room in the world to.
But there is very specific things. Again, we keep saying, like, I don't like the generic, like, Anna Kasparian, probably you disagree with her on like 2% of all she says. Anna Kasparian, 19 times out of 20 has done good things for trans people. You might be angry about the 1 out of 20 we just don't disagree with, but it's a debate. Check out Scientific American. They've got a really good article called What Science on Gender Affirming Care for Trans Kids Really Shows, that goes through a bunch of different topics, especially for people who might not be familiar with a handful of them, including laws in the past, why there's differences between the DSM-4 and the DSM-5, why certain categories are no longer characterized the way they are, why the, desist rate of 85% is completely bogus and has been completely debunked at this point as well. And also talking about puberty blockers, right? A 2021 systemic review of 44 peer-reviewed studies found the parents' connectedness measured by a 6-question scale asking about such things as how safe young people feel confiding in their guardians, or how they feel in their families, associated with greater resilience amongst teens and young adults who are trans or gender diverse. Rafferty says his role with regard to pre-pubertal children in offering a safe environment for the kid to explore their gender and for parents to ask questions. The gender-affirming approach is not some railroad of people or hormones and surgery. It is like talking and watching and being conservative. Only once children are older and if the incongruence between the sex assigned with them at birth and experienced gender has persisted, does discussion of medical transition occur. First, the gender therapist has to diagnose the young person with gender dysphoria. After gender dysphoria diagnosis, and only after earlier conversations suggest hormones are indicated, guidelines call for the discussion of fertility, puberty suppression, and hormones. Puberty suppressing medications have been used for decades for cis children who start puberty early but are not meant to be used indefinitely. The Endocrine Society guidelines recommend a maximum of 2 years on GnRHA therapy to allow more time for children to form their gender identity. And by the way, as soon as they decide that they either want to or not want to proceed with gender affirming care, they will go off puberty blockers, and if they want to proceed with transitioning, they will then be put onto HRT. And they will not be on puberty blockers anymore. So all of the potential negative effects that could come from being on puberty blockers for a long period of time will suddenly subside. Which is why, again, it is not being done without caution. It's a cautionary, let's see if we can buy a little bit of time while you decide whether or not this is something that you sincerely want to go down, because it eventually will reach certain things that will be irreversible. Of course, in the same way they would be irreversible if you went through your puberty. You have to understand that, like, as cis people, we don't have to worry about this, and we never did when we were going through puberty. But if that was the case, again, if you were at that point in high school where every one of your peers was suddenly, if you're a dude, if you're a cis guy, right, all of your peers start to, you know, their voices start to get a little deeper, they start to grow hair on their chest, all of a sudden, you know, they start to grow taller and grow in other places as well. There starts to be hair where there wasn't hair before, and they start to break up their, and it's happening. There's all that social awkwardness, and it's happening all around you. Well, imagine if that was happening to you as, again, a cis man, man, and all of a sudden you started going through the wrong puberty. You started growing giant breasts, and all of a sudden your voice started to get really high pitched, and all of a sudden your penis started to shrink and go inside your body. Think of like how fucking much that would fuck with you in addition to everything else. So yeah, it's a modern miracle that we have the ability to be able to help children who may be going through something like that, right? It's just like, why would you want to get in the way between patients and their doctors? Hormone blocker treatment may have side effects. A 2015 longitudinal observation cohort study of 34 trans youth found that by the time the participants were 22 years old, trans women experienced a decrease in bone mineral density. A 2020 study of puberty suppression in gender diverse and trans youth found that those who started puberty blockers in early puberty had lower bone mineral density before they started the treatment than the public at large. This suggests, the authors wrote, that GnRHA use may not cause low bone mineral density for these young people. Instead, they found a lack of exercise was the primary factor in low bone density, especially amongst trans girls. Other side effects of GnRHA therapy include weight gain, hot flashes, and mood swings, but studies have found that these side effects and puberty delay itself are reversible, Safer says. Gender-affirming hormone therapy also involves taking an androgen blocker, a chemical that blocks release of testosterone and other androgen hormones, and estrogen in trans feminine teens, and testosterone supplementation in trans teens. Such hormones may be associated with some psychological changes for adult transgender people. For instance, trans feminine people taking estrogen see their so-called good cholesterol increase. By contrast, trans masculine people taking testosterone see their good cholesterol decrease. Some studies have hinted to the effects of bone mineral density, but these are complicated and also depend on the personal family history, exercise, and many other factors in addition to hormones. No one is trying to keep this a secret. There is no agenda to block this information. There is no lobby to keep this a secret from everybody, where it's just like, hey, by the way, I hope everyone understands. Yeah, they're not letting us have this debate. They won't even tell you about the potential risks. Look at all these risks. No, these are publicly available information at this point, which, yes, learn about them. And yes, this is the decision that's going to be a difficult decision to be made, but like any other medical decision, it should be between the patient, the child, the doctor, and the parents. They should be the ones making it based on the best possible information and the best possible accessibility to potentially life-saving care. That's what this all really gets down to. And why there is a responsibility, I'm sorry, on leftists, even if you think this is all culture war, identity politics bullshit. This is what the right has chosen. This is the entry point for fascism. This is what they are picking as their main thing they talk about nonstop. So it's not something you can ignore. And if you want to advocate for the civil rights of other people, then yes, it falls upon us to start learning this shit.
Hear somebody sound off on complicated, controversial issues and say, yeah, I think you got this part wrong. I think you got that part wrong. You know, here's my argument, etc. I think that's totally legitimate. What I do have a problem with is sort of writing people off on the basis of disagreement on one issue out of every 20, even on this, on the broader issue of trans rights. So
no one did that, and it was way more than just one, by the way. There's multiple times now. All of the good faith that was given to Anna being like, oh, by the way, Anna, just so you know, this birthing person thing, this one, it's not something that people are forcing women to be called. It's just, it's in addition to, it's comma. I know you know this. Here's you having the exact same position as me 11 months ago. Here's you once again having the same position as me on another topic. Like we know you know, and then doing it again. Now popularizing the bonus holes story, which again, thanks Anna, that whole fucking Ollie London gender critical bullshit that would have been known in the fringes of the right is now a main fucking player. And now Tim Pool gets to put that on his show. Tim Pool did 2 separate fucking videos on how cringe leftists want to call vaginas bonus holes. Yeah, Anna Kasparian pushes back against the cringe left who want to erase the word vagina because they're disgusting.
Somebody who fundamentally agrees with us, I think, on the basic question, and who even, let's say for the sake of argument, gets some of the harder questions wrong, or thinks that that like tactically that like certain fights aren't worth having, that you actually do think are worth having. Fine, those are discussions that are well worth having, and if you want to have them, I will mostly shut up and listen because I don't know a tremendous amount about most of these things.
We're 20 minutes into this though. You're the only one who's spoken. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this good faith. It's hard though. You have just spread a lot of fucking both sides of the debate problems here, especially the ones related to puberty blockers. As long as you continue to get people in a state where they feel there is some irreparable damage or potentially a debate that is taking place right now amongst the medical community about whether or not children are allowed to use these puberty blockers, a lot of that quote-unquote debate, especially when it's happening in places of Europe where, yes, they have reversed their stances on certain uses of puberty blockers in countries such as, like, you know, the Scandinavian countries as well, the ones that always get the praise, that is ideologically driven. When you look at what that movement has done, especially the gender critical movement in the UK, they have been one of the key factors behind all of this. Yes, they have been successful at reversing the scientific community's medical consensus on this stuff because they are ideologically driven. That is what they are trying to push for, and they are doing that through political action, and they're having success. When left to the scientific community, it's something that they want to reverse. They are outspoken, this is wrong. You are ignoring the facts on this.
But if you're going to start writing people off as enemies and comparing them to, you know, Dave Rubin leaving the left or whatever, even though, you know, Anna has actually become much more socialist in the last few years, and as I think you can pretty clearly see from part of the interview played earlier, has not backed down on any of that stuff, right? Has, if anything, doubled down on a lot of those views, that is not advocating socially conservative positions on trans rights. I think that's a real mistake. I think if you want to build, and there's a lot of talk about, like, oh, you know, feeling at home in the left or not the left or whatever. There kind of is no left in America. I wish there was. But really what we're mostly talking about when we talk about the left are journalists and academics and some fledgling left labor organizing that's really important, and it could be the basis of a real serious left with roots in the working class. And I think if we're going to talk about the kind of left that we could build, that
this is one of the things I do hate about the entire thing, where it's like, you know, no war but the class war. We have to continuously perpetuate this idea that there's only one real pathway forward with this. It's that, like, everyone does realize, I hope, at a certain point, that there are trans people in the workforce as well, and that they are directly discriminated for being trans. Non-binary people, just recently, Steven Crowder was like, you know, fucking almost celebrating the fact, like, shocker, that non-binary people who use they, them pronouns in their job applications, have way less statistical callbacks. That's workplace discrimination. That's exactly what is happening there. It doesn't matter how you try and twist this. It's like, oh yeah, maybe you shouldn't have been asking for attention. Those are your pronouns. In the same way, someone might use Mr., right? On a job application, if someone uses mix, MX, all of a sudden they have a less higher likelihood of getting called back for a job. Yeah, that's discrimination. That's workplace discrimination based on the fact that they happen to be non-binary. They are non-binary. That is their own gender identity that they are now finally having the language to be able to express. They don't have to be in these fucking rigid confines that are lies anymore, which is a wondrous thing. You don't have to be like, well, I'm a man, even though I'm not a man. I never was. I've been non-binary this whole time, and it's really weird to have to continuously associate with this. But that's what people call me. I go into a room and they're like, hey, you dude, he, him, sir.
That would actually win real gains on material issues, which would, by the way, disproportionately benefit trans people and other marginalized groups who are likely to be subject to housing and employment.
I'm not 100% sure, Laura. I'm just waiting to hear back from her.
I don't think that we should go around completely writing people off on the basis of any disagreement on what are often very messy.
And again, no one did that. Everyone so many times was in good faith. Anna. Like, you saw the replies from all of the lefties. It wasn't a dog pile. It was so many people just friendly being like, Anna, no, just so you know, by the way, this only really serves the far right. Oh, Anna, no one's actually trying to call anyone birthing person. Oh, Anna, just so you know, Jesse Singal is actually a pretty fucking well-documented transphobe at this point. You might be mistaken. Oh, Anna, no one's actually doing the whole bonus holes thing. This is actually a fucking kind of like, you know, an operation that took place 3 years ago, actually, that the writer trying to turn into a culture war issue. Like, very specific takes, specific instances.
You know, often very messy edge cases and dilemmas. And I kind of think, like, I don't know, man. I think the entire task of the left right now is to find ways to change the channel from arguments about cultural sensibilities to arguments about material interests. Not because there are no fights that are worth having on cultural that have to do with cultural sensibilities. There are. You can't entirely avoid that. But that's the terrain that...
I mean, the thing that sucks, this is just the reality of the world, is that when you are queer, you don't get to pick whether or not your life is politicized. That's the part that sucks. You don't get to choose that. It just is. Just by virtue of existing. And yeah, people's entire framework of how they see and perceive you changes based on that. If you want to see that firsthand, check out people in my interviews whenever they find out that I'm bi and they didn't know that previously, and just the shock sometimes, and then the fucking, there is a change. You can see it, whether it's like, oh wow, Lance, you're really queer coded, and then, oh, I never saw you as that way. It's like, well, then how did you see me? Like, to me, it's always like, how did that change? I'm just curious. Like, what about it? What about me as a person changed? Because like, I feel personally the exact same, right? I feel the exact same as I was before. And I mean, in your eyes, if it's like, I can't really see Lance as this dude who likes women, that shouldn't change either, because I mostly like women. I'm usually perpetually attracted and falling in love with women. That's kind of my thing. I'm just occasionally sexually attracted to men. But like, that shouldn't change the way you feel about me. But I see it. I get it. And it changes the way you have to talk about me to your friends now. And you might have to refer to me as oh, I actually have a gay friend. And oh, I know a queer, you know? Oh, I got an F-slur. I got an F-slur. Yeah, that Lance is an F-slur, right? You do F-slur shit, right? Yeah, occasionally. Oh, okay, so we got an F-slur, you know? It's one of those things where all of a sudden it's like, it sucks, but like, you don't get to choose whether or not your life is political. I imagine, because this is theoretical to me, but I imagine it's the same when you're black. I imagine it's the same when you're visually indigenous. I imagine it's the same when you're a woman. I imagine it's the same when you're trans. And I imagine it's different than when you're trans than when you are passing and when you're not passing. I imagine it's, again, I keep saying I imagine because it's all theoretical to me, right? I can tell you the ones that I have experienced firsthand, but yes, it's so, I would love it. And I'm sure, I can't speak for them, but I'm sure trans people would love it too, if the right would shut the fuck up. If the right would just leave them alone, if the right would stop obsessing with them, if the right would stop making it the centerpiece of their politics, of their own ideological fucking identity. Like, how do you fucking, you know, go about the world? Well, my politics are that I want to stop the trans agenda. That's all anyone, like, Matt Walsh, what do you like at dinner parties? Oh, this is my husband, Matt Walsh. Well, he smells weird. Yeah, that's true. We can't stop that. And then he's like, I'm Matt Walsh. He's like, Matt, what do you do? I'm stopping the radical trans agenda from mutilating children, strangers' kids I'm quite obsessed with. I do want to go to schools and check out strangers' children's genitals to make sure they don't play on the wrong sports teams. I'm very concerned about these things. What is a woman? Are you a woman? What is a woman? Tell me, let me see your vagina. Prove it. Like, all right, god damn it. But that's what they're focused on. They're the ones making this into the culture war issue. So it would be wondrous. Yes, I agree, Ben, that like it would be so cool if all of a sudden people would just wake up to class antagonism, because they have to. And that's why it's one of the reasons I try to stress that people can't ignore these aspects of it, because otherwise you are going to get a very large population of especially cis het and predominantly white people who are confused about issues like white supremacy, who are confused about issues like transphobia, homophobia, queerphobia, gender constructs, gender norms. What exactly are gender norms reinforcing? Why is it that these things are directly linked and interconnected with other forms of patriarchal subjugation? Why is it that it seems like right-wing conservatives are obsessed, fucking obsessed with trans women specifically? They barely speak about trans men, but they are obsessed with trans women. And just like it seems to be this almost fucking obsession that they're willing to destroy their entire lives. You see men go down these weird pathways of divorce and sadness, and it's like, oh god, how did they take this from me? Oh, the trans people stole everything. And it's like, what? No, if I was your wife, I wouldn't want to be around you. You sound horrible. Like, I don't know if I would be insecure or if I would be angry, or I would just be like, ew, what happened to you? Like, is there something you want to tell me? We could have that conversation, please. Like, you don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to be ashamed. But are you attracted to trans women? That's okay. That's fine. Most people are. No, it doesn't make you gay. You're okay. You're not gay. Don't worry. No, it's their femininity. You are still attracted to femininity. That's why you're attracted to. These aren't traps. No. What are you saying right now, honey? You're fine. You're fine. It's okay. It's normal. It's all normal. But you don't have to hate yourselves. No, you don't have to make it into a cause. No, you don't have to go after children. That's silly. Why go after kids? No, don't hate yourself. Why? Oh God, you hate yourself so much. This is sad.
I think it's going to end up ultimately being much better for the right, because it splits people 50-50 oftentimes, or if not exactly 50-50, whatever. I mean, it splits people in much messier, more unpredictable ways. Whereas I think the more we can fight about material interests, the better terrain that's going to be for the left. And that is my piece. I am going to let anybody else who wants to weigh in on this weigh in.
I mean, this is actually a material interest for people because, I mean, my child has gone through the wrong puberty. So it kind of ticks me off a bit when somebody does step in it. And I totally, like, I'm not gonna, you've not seen me online, jumping down Anna's throat. I've not accused her of anything because I don't know the heart of her, character. Yeah. I rewatched Benny's statement. I actually did stream with Benny. Go check out that episode of Movie Night Extravaganza. We had a phenomenal conversation about what it is being trans. I think we talked about a terrible movie and it pissed everybody off. And what was the movie? It was the Danish Girl. Don't watch it. It's a bunch of white cis people.
Hold on. I heard of knowledge and recognition there.
Oh no, I've heard about this movie. I've never seen it. Yeah, just acknowledging its existence.
Just curious.
Yeah, it's basically a bunch of like people who've never experienced being trans, taking a book that took so much liberties of the actual source material and adapting it into a film that, okay, maybe there's a few scenes that people can relate to who are trans, but they get so much wrong about it. And we just spent the entire time just ripping the movie apart. They even got stuff wrong about being an artist. Like I was pissed about that. But anyways, that's not important here. I just wanted to point to that discussion where if you really want to delve into a lot of, trans issue is material for some people. It is, I mean, I'm very lucky. My children actually go to a doctor that specializes in, transitioning, like I actually have access to.
I know my heart went out to J. Andrew World. By the way, sometimes you'll see me wearing a Michael Brooks cartoon shirt. That's his art. He's a really talented artist. You should go follow him on Twitter. And I reached out to him and I was like, immediately, I was like, I'm sorry. I could tell that you were like, having a hard time on this show.
Experts on this. And my children, that's their pediatrician. I know I am lucky on this, and not everybody has, a loving father or access to such things. And
Letterhack, I've had your Michael Brooks shirt, but I wear a black and white one that J. Andrew World specifically made. That's his art actually. And this, like, again, when you could just hear it in his words. He's lived through this.
I mean, what has upset me the most is that one of Benny's big complaints about Anna is that she didn't listen to her. And you have somebody who's like, hey, look, what you're doing hurts me. And this is why. And then just completely be ignored about it was just frustrating to the point where, like, Anna actually is promoting a actual transphobe. Somebody who's actually going out there putting out, anti-trans propaganda.
And it's about Jesse Singal.
Yeah, tweeting out that this is a legit. I don't know Jesse Singal's
let me just,
all of it, but I know he's
jump in on this a little bit, right? Because Jesse Singal is somebody who I definitely have. I mean, look, he's been a guest on the show. They have this is somebody I've known for years, and I certainly do not agree with on everything that's related to this. We've had arguments about this, but I don't actually think has the views that a lot of people in this discussion think that he has. So a lot of what I've seen, certainly the Twitter discussion the last week, has been Jesse Singal. Jesse Singal wrote an article where he was defending this guy who is doing conversion therapy, and then Anna's defending Jesse Singal. But there are a couple of issues there. One is that if you actually look at the original article, that people said, this is Jesse Singal defending conversion therapy. Well, Jesse Singal was defending a doctor who's accused of doing conversion therapy and who he doesn't think did. There is actually a lot of he said, she said about what happened there. There's essentially, we're talking about somebody who, there's a sort of debate among gender clinicians about when you talk about very young children, nowhere near puberty, how whether at that point, you should how you should sort of proceed, and in terms of whether people, are on a course towards, maybe.
And so, yeah, I obviously, I was really angry yesterday when this was all happening, especially because, like, I feel so bad for J. Andrew World. I don't know if he knew that he was going to be put on this, in the spot, in this position where we would have to start talking about this. He's absolutely 100% correct, by the way. Jesse Singal is a transphobe. He's got his own section in GLAAD. Jesse Singal, journalist, wrote covers for The Atlantic, headline, "When Children Say They Are Trans, Hormone Surgery, the Choices Are Fraught. There Are No Easy Answers." Singal raises the questions in the article, but when it comes to the question of physical interventions, this era is also fraught with new challenges. When it comes to many parents, where's the line between not feeling like a girl because society makes it difficult to be a girl and needing hormones to alleviate dysphoria that otherwise won't go away? How can parents tell? How can they help children gain access to the support and medical help they might need, while also keeping in mind in adolescence is by definition a time of fevered identity exploration? Maybe we should have experts in that field to have consultations and discussions, both with the parents and with the children, in order to help that process and maybe give them more access to the ability to figure that stuff out, rather than be like, but yeah. Again, a lot of what Jesse Singal and a lot of what Anna is doing right now, like Katie Montgomery pointed out, these are gender critical takes, perspectives, and strategies that are now being and attempted to be repeated in America because they have been so successful in Britain. And it's that very specific kind of transphobia that overlaps a lot with, like, TERF ideology, where this is like, well, we're simply coming at this from a critical standpoint and we want to know all the information, and not enough people are willing to have a discussion, and I'm sorry, frankly, a necessary debate on whether or not some of these forms of care could have irreversible or irreparable damage on children. And this is what's important, and they're mutilating them. They're mutilating their bodies. Ignoring the diversity of these experiences, focusing only on those who are effectively, quote, born in the wrong body could cause harm. That is the argument of a small but vocal group of men and women who have transitioned only to return to their assigned sex. Singal's story was criticized for front-loading the rarer cases. Quote, as the piece goes on, notably without a single happy, well-adjusted trans teen amongst its host of central characters, for the first 9,000 plus words, it becomes apparent that certain voices and fears are privileged over others. The Atlantic published a follow-up letter from parents. By the way, the parents of a lot of the trans kids, as well as a lot of other trans kids themselves, I should say the patients, an overwhelming amount of patients came forward from those same hospitals to be like, this is not true. This was life-saving. This changed our kids' lives. We don't know where they would be right now if it were not for their ability to have access to this life-saving care. That is what is coming out of their mouths. And so all of a sudden, you can see how insidious the very act of simply, well, I'm just setting this up as a civil conversation so we can find out where the truth lies, both sides in the debate. And again, for the first 9,000 fucking words of this article, I'm not going to show you a single well-adjusted or happy trans teen. In fact, think of 9,000 words worth of reading of kids with depression, anxiety, all of this kind of stuff, specifically because that's the narrative that you're trying to push, when that is not representational at all of what's happening. That's lying to people through deception, right? Like a specific insidious form of it. Not going as far as being like, trans people are all depressed, they're all evil. And you don't have to be like that. You can do it in this method and act as if you were a journalist, simply questioning things, trying to find out where the truth lies. But it gets much worse when it comes to Jesse Singal, by the way. The Atlantic published the follow-up letters. I write to you as a mother of a trans son. This piece penned by you is highly problematic. It muddies the waters for parents navigating the path of raising a trans child and is damaging to our trans youth. The Atlantic published additional articles to explain the concern of the trans community, including one headlined, "The Loaded Language Shaping the Trans Conversation," to focus on, quote, desisters, people who experience gender dysphoria and then ultimately decide not to transition, is to focus on the rarest of cases and to ignore the vastly more common experience of trans teens, that of being second-guessed. Which is so crucial, which is so important here right now. It's one of those things where, like, holy fuck, there is a culture war debate where journalists have completely failed in their duty to report on this properly. They're not reporting on the vast majority of this as being culture war focused terrorism, where it's like, hey, by the way, there are hospitals, there are doctors, there are nurses, they're getting death threats and bomb threats. There are schools, there are teachers, there are supervisors, there are superintendents, there are principals getting death threats and bomb threats. These people are getting non-stop harassment from this very, very vocal and loud and militant group. Drag shows have people showing up with fucking guns and shirts that say kill your local pedophiles on them. People are shooting up power grids. People are going into clubs and killing people. There are mass murders and mass murder events events. There is so much violence and crime, and it keeps ramping up towards all these people. People are getting stabbed in classrooms here in Canada, in fucking Waterloo. 3 people got fucking stabbed in a gender studies class. A lot of this has to do with the way there has been a manipulation by, in large part, people who say they are journalists, and they are both sides in a debate of a 94% satisfaction reported and a 6% dissatisfaction reported. And of those 6%, the reason for detransitioning is societal stigma. So it's like, even amongst the people who detransition, it's the societal stigma is the reason they detransition or begin to detransition. And yet you framed it in such a way now where everyone reading this is going to come away from it thinking that there's a debate and people have lost their minds. Meanwhile, like, the scientists are so far away from it all. They're way over here, and then way off in another universe is the majority of normies and the media and everyone be like, oh, so there's a debate, you say? Oh, well, hey, I'm for trans rights, I'm for, human rights, all that. I got the t-shirt, don't worry. But what are you saying this Lupron? Apparently it has irreparable damage to children. Oh, well, I mean, I'm not going through puberty. I'm also not a child. I don't have kids who are going through puberty, and I also don't have trans children, so none of this will apply directly to me, but I do think that we should restrict their ability to get it. We should stop their ability to do a thing that doesn't directly affect me, but I've got opinions based on the news articles that I've read by Jesse Singal. Yeah, and hey, why isn't anyone asking these important questions that Jesse Singal is asking? Questions like, do we really know when someone is trans? What about, kids who just turn out to be gay? What if you happen to have a gay boy? Does that mean that that person is also a girl? Are they going to have irreversible surgery because of those reasons? Maybe they should be converted. Maybe we should have some kind of conversion therapy where they're able to, again, learn what they truly are. Like, goddamn, Jesse Singal is not a good person. Analysis from sociologist at Columbia University explains, this frames journalists used to discuss these controversial issues, all by themselves political and moral decisions, the ones of great consequence. They set the terms by which the public understands trans youth. A critical point is that these are rare cases. In my own conversation, even the most conservative clinicians told me rarely, if ever, to see someone make a full social and medical transition when they experience serious regret. Singal's story was cited in a legal brief filed by 7 state attorney generals in federal lawsuits seeking to roll back trans persons' access to healthcare. Singal addressed the criticism in a Medium post a few months later after the story was published. These are eminently fair, good faith critiques that I happen to disagree with. All I can say is the decision in question was a matter of careful and often anguished collaboration with my editors as the piece was written, that moving any one part would move up the necessitated bumping some other part down. There are trade-offs inherent to structuring a piece. This is large and complicated, and there's no way I could do that without the valid critiques from some party or another. I stand by the piece. Why? I'm sorry, you can't say that he's not a transphobe when you get called out direct for your transphobia. And again, you could use much stronger language. You don't get to dance behind, well, I was presenting an argument. I simply may have platformed one side of that argument almost exclusively, and in some ways exaggerated, manipulated, or not represented the vast majority of the people who actually underwent these procedures, the patients, the parents, and it turns out the parents en masse are coming out and making statements and being like, you lied, this was life-saving, this fucking changed my kid's life, and he's like, I stand by it. I said, like, I'm sorry, but I'm a journalist. We have to ask the hard questions, right? Admitting to misrepresenting a study on trans kids' alleged desistance, continued to support exploring desistance despite its rarity. The concept of desistance on its own should never be used as a justification for taking or recommending one course of action or another with a given gender dysphoric kid. As numerous clinicians have told me in their reporting on this endlessly fascinating and fraught subject, it's vital to take an individualized approach, to get to know a kid and see where they're at and what the sources of their distress are. Desistance is just one part of the puzzle. We shouldn't ignore it, though, and it makes no sense to claim it's just a, quote, myth raised without citation. Trauma, particularly sexual trauma, can contribute to exacerbate gender dysphoria in some patients. Trauma, including sexual trauma, is an unfortunately common, involving an estimated 1 in 5 women. There is no proven link between sexual trauma and sexual orientation or gender identity. For the people in the fucking back, Jesse Singal is a transphobe. This is ascientific shit he is spouting for a fucking ideological agenda. You don't get to sit back and be like, well, no, I think he's simply asking questions. He's you know how I know all of this? You want my feels? When I pointed a lot of this out to Jesse with receipts, that's when he blocks me. That's bro, too much. When you counter him with the science, if you say, hey, by the way, Jesse, here is a meta study. This meta study encompasses a whole bunch of different countries. We're talking countries all across the planet, countries that have similar economies, countries that have similar access to healthcare. In some cases, obviously, there's going to be an outlier in the form of America, which has very poor access to healthcare. But anyways, all of these large Western nations that have in some way or another allowed gender-affirming care to take place amongst their medical community. Look at this. When we look at a meta study, a combination of all of these other studies, it shows overwhelmingly the vast majority of people who undergo this have positive outcomes. We're talking, again, less than 4% have regrets, less than 4%. So this is just a situation where the overwhelming amount of people have good experiences, which is not always common in medicine. Knee surgery, again, knee surgery is what, 20%? 20% regret? It's much better knee surgery. Ain't no protests in front of the knees. I don't see you all on your knees in front of fucking knee surgeons' rooms being like, butchers, murderers, you took their knees away from them. That was God's design. The knees. There's no proven link between sexual trauma and sexual orientation or gender identity. I have had zero, hardcore sexual abuse in my childhood. Did not influence whether or not I would later on find out my own sexual orientation. Being pansexual, I suppose. Orientation, gender identity. Singal defended including the line in a Medium post. I've encountered this link over and over and over. Dozens of hours of conversation with gender clinicians. Does that mean any or even most kids with gender dysphoria felt the dysphoria emerge in the immediate wake of the trauma? No, I bet most clinicians I spoke to would describe it as rare or pretty rare. But it still happens. I think it's one piece of the puzzle that clinicians keep in mind when working with individual patients, and therefore an important thing for anyone with any interest on the subject to know about. Amplified unproven theory of social contagions. Some anecdotal evidence suggests that social forces can play a role in a young person's gender questioning. I've been seeing this more frequently. Laura Edwards, Lepper, wrote in an email, a widely cited study on this alleged influence was reissued with the correction, reading in part, rapid onset gender dysphoria is not a formal mental health diagnosis at this time. This report did not collect data from adolescents and young adults or clinicians and therefore does not validate the phenomenon. Jesse Singal is a transphobe. You don't get to hide behind, I'm a journalist. Well, I can't be transphobic. I'm a journalist. Yes. Oh, well, I might be reporting on this new phenomenon of measuring skulls, and they call it phrenology. And apparently it's been able to show and demonstrate scientifically differences in intelligence between the black race and the superior white race. And I'm going to now write an article about it. I'm going to talk about that. Again, this is not me in any way being racist, okay? I'm not furthering a whole bunch of quackery and racist nonsense right now. I'm simply reporting on this phenomenon that's happening before my very eyes. It's like, yeah, but history's going to remember this. Again, when it's something where overwhelming amount of people have positive outcomes from this, it is life-saving, then yeah, they're going to look back and be like, what the fuck were people doing? Why were they platforming the less than 4% to oftentimes say it's because of social stigma? I don't know what to tell you. This thing, you know. Anyways, if you want this link, here's a link to the GLAD Accountability Project and their personal page on Jesse Singal and the many lies and stuff he's spread. If you want a more in-depth debunking of it all, I would recommend www.erinninthemorning.com, and then you will find a whole bunch of her articles, and she's got a very in-depth one that explains not only how Jesse Singal misrepresented a lot of both the studies, the data, and the results that he was publishing, but may be in a lot of trouble for, again, leaking sensitive medical information. They are trying to defend themselves under the Whistleblower Act, but that's not going to apply to Jesse Singal in this case, so he may be in a bit of hot water. We'll see. He could get away with it. You know, it's certainly not outside of the realm of possibility for that to all happen, but we'll see.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you kindly to our Lord and Saviors Peyton L. Just and Xander Corvus. Without you, we are nothing. And now, a shout out to our Knights of the Square Table. Amazing Flesh, Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, DM Rivera, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hegbard Celine, Izzy Solidarity, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Nettle, Omni, Peanut Butter Blonde, Political Papi, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Kubi, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demmel, Thomas, Trevbot EXE, Lucidry, Words Greenwood, Cheryl Alvarez, Tony Perkins, Thomas, O'Pecker, Travis McClinton, and Victoria Bell. Thank you so much. And a huge shout out to all the other people who make this entire show possible. Without you, it would not exist. If you can support us, please go to patreon.com/theserfs, and even $1 can help unlock all of the little goodies and help make this show entirely possible.